These are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to S2H's webinar titled Retiring Applications, the Low-Hanging Fruit in IT Savings. Today's presenters are Mark Hebert, COO S2H, and Brian Babineau, Vice President Research and Analyst Services ESG. Mark Hebert joined S2H in December 2008 as Chief Operating Officer. Over his 30-plus year career, he has held senior management positions at Accenture, Oracle, Virtusa, and Sierra Atlantic. He manages S2H's enterprise data management practice and its strategic relationship with IBM. Brian is Vice President of Research and Analyst Services at ESG. He, along with ESG's Director of Research, are responsible for driving ESG's market research and publishing agendas across all technology segments, including data management. We will be emailing a link to the recorded webinar to all that registered. Thank you, Mark and Brian, for presenting, and I'll turn the webinar over to you now.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the third in our series of webinars on enterprise data management. Today we have an interesting topic that deals with something very timely in large and medium-sized enterprises in the IT shop, and that is the whole subject of retiring inactive applications. As the title of our webinar suggests, this is an area ripe for cost savings in IT during a time when budget pressures continue to be a dominant factor in IT priorities. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about what that opportunity is. We have some primary research that Brian and his team have, and the whole area of where companies are seeing the opportunities in retiring applications and what priorities they're assigning to them. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of our experiences in helping major clients retire large numbers of applications using IBM Optum technology. So that's the agenda for today. Let me paint the picture of what this opportunity is and why it's relevant in today's market, why it represents a convergence of some factors going on that make this a particularly good time. I'd say one major factor is over the last decade or more, there's been an increasing amount of merger and acquisition activity across a lot of industries in large and even medium-sized enterprises. And as a result, there are a lot of applications that have become redundant, and many of them are no longer being actively used for daily transactions, but they are still sitting around and being used to access data for various purposes. And so that creates this opportunity of the idea of taking these applications and moving them out of production usage and be able to save the attendant hardware, software, database, and labor associated with them. The other major trend that we're seeing in all of this is not only merger and acquisition activity, but the trend toward increasing technology innovation that almost guarantees that today's applications will be obsolete in 3 to 5 to 10 years, simply because something bigger and better comes along that's more efficient. And as a result, companies are churning their application profiles more than ever. Increasing trend toward regulatory compliance in many industries, and we'll talk about why some industries are experiencing a lot more need for compliance and regulatory requirements, so that the data that's in these applications, even though they're no longer being used in production, that data has to be kept around for reporting purposes, for potential litigation, and for regulatory oversight, even Sarbanes-Oxley. And so those three trends are driving an increasing need for finding ways to reduce the cost footprint in IT with these applications and still making that data available to the end of its useful life, and that useful life in many ways is being extended through compliance requirements. So as a result, we're seeing an increasing slice of the IT pie going to maintaining these inactive applications. As Douglas MacArthur once said, old soldiers never die, they just fade away. And that's what's happening in a lot of these applications. These are the old soldiers in IT. So the traditional approach to doing this sort of thing, to retiring an application, was simply to write it off to tape. And that meant not only the data itself, but the application code. And in some ways, that process has been a crapshoot. You write it off to the tape, and you sort of hope that you never are going to have to go get it back again. And if you do, it's possible that the hardware you ran it on is no longer available or is no longer running properly. There's a lot of risk associated with trying to bring back an application that is being written off or saved off to tape. So it turns out now that technology is offering a better way, and that's the major opportunity we want to talk about today. Instead of doing that traditional approach of writing the whole application off, let's consider the idea of retiring the application code, the hardware, the software, and just saving the data, since it's the data itself that may be needed down the road. So we're going to talk now about how to do that and what the growing trends are in this whole area. Some of the trends that IT departments are seeing from the research that ESG has done. And I'll turn it over to Brian.
Great, Mark. Thank you so much, and thank you to S28 for having ESG participate here. As a market research and analyst firm, our goal is to stay on top of what's happening out in the marketplace from a purchasing perspective, but also looking at what's available from a technology and services standpoint, demand. And a lot of the questions we get from folks on the IT buying side of things is, how do I prioritize projects? I have a laundry list of things that I need to get done, and of course I have my metrics of how to prioritize them, whether it be TCO, ROI. But there's usually some intangibles, or there's usually parts of projects that are often forgotten, which actually minimize an ROI for what I had done. To give you a sense of why we feel, and we use the title low-hanging fruit, to give you a sense of why we believe application retirement is moving up on the priority stack, or why it should move up on the project priority list. I'm going to share a few statistics that we have for some research that we did exiting 2011, and some statistics that we have just in the beginning of 2012. We first went off to see, there's a lot of data management trends out there. There's, as Mark pointed out, there's a slew of market trends that are changing the way we need to manage data inside of structured applications. And those trends drive the need for new applications, and subsequently we have choices to make with our legacy applications. And I'm going to go through some of that. Our research, we wanted to put forth some basics out there to see if people actually knew what the concept of an application retirement or application decommissioning was. So I share with you on this slide, and as Mark highlighted in the introduction, the whole concept, is a result of either newer applications being run on board and there's redundancy, or the fact that there's been some sort of business transaction, merger and acquisition, or absorption where that results in redundant systems. Getting rid of one of those systems, or the legacy system as we've defined it here, is really what we're talking about when we discuss application retirement. However, as for compliance reasons and other things that have been suggested, there's a need to access that data, and there's a growing need to access that data. Just simply putting the code tree and the associated data on tape and hoping you never have to get it again is a little bit of naive thinking from our standpoint. And what's the motivation? This is a cost reduction strategy, and I think the problem is people view this as an isolated project. In reality, when you're going through application transitions or application modernization projects, everybody thinks about the new thing being deployed, and as opposed to what do we do with the old thing. And I share a personal example that actually happened this morning. Is I had a TV break inside of my house. And my first inclination was to think about how do I get a new TV to keep the family happy. But the second thing that I really need to think about is what do I do with the old one? And no longer can I put that out by the trash. There's recycling requirements. There's places that you can turn it in to actually receive a rebate. There's the green factor that I want to respect the environment. So not only am I thinking about the new TV, but I'm also thinking about what do I do with the old one. And I think that is the mindset that has to happen in application projects going forward. And as we transition to the next slide, I'm just going to give you some statistics from our research. And I think you can do, there's two things you can do with data, from a market research perspective. There's one that you can use them in your arsenal to help build that project prioritization and fill out the project portfolio that you have. The second is to help utilize them in your justification of, how do we move this forward? How do we make sure that an application upgrade also includes an application retirement project? And very often, again, we see people leaving off the second half of that. So why do things become legacy? And this is to think about the market trends that are out there. 7%, according to our research, 7% of IT budgets are going to be spent on cloud, and a big part of that is software as a service applications or hybrid applications where some stay on-premise or a module stays on-premise and other modules are delivered via the cloud. Application upgrades as a result of many of the innovations in the database structure, whether it be new types of database, where those databases are run. We've seen a lot of innovation out of the folks like IBM, from the folks of IBM, of how to implement that underpin these applications. And then, of course, there's also new things that can be done, whether it be expanding human capital management to include recruiting and talent management, all the way through extending ERP to include social components. Right? There's always new reasons to evolve applications, and we think because spending's been on the sideline for applications the past couple of years, we think there's a spur there. And then, of course, that creates what we believe, out of these redundant applications, merger and acquisitions. There's consolidation going on. That's one of the biggest cost reduction things happening in IT these days. So our belief is that at least one of these things is happening inside of most organizations, whether it be small to mid-sized business all the way up to large enterprise. There's key decisions on the application portfolio being made which result in one of these situations, creating that quote-unquote legacy application challenge that exists. And as we move on to the next data point that ESG thinks very enlightening is, why do these things get kept around? I think Mark and the team at S2 have done a good job pinpointing some of the pains or some of the easy ways. I'm going to use the analogy again of just putting the old TV out by the trash and forgetting about what the real options are and what the actual long-term cost may be of doing that. The thing that keeps why people are keeping these legacy applications running on whatever infrastructure frequently is proprietary infrastructure that's very expensive to maintain, upgrade. You still go through the migration process. And the reason this is all done is because you have to get access to the data for reporting purposes. Others just believe that they need their users are still taking advantage of the application data because there may be one query or something that gets done every quarter and it gets produced out. And then over a third down there, 35% still have the regulatory reasons that have to be abided by, or they use it for internal audit purposes or something of that nature. So there's a myriad of reasons why we still keep these things around, yet and it's usually because we keep them running because the alternative is to actually completely shut them down and make the data entirely inaccessible, which just won't work. Moving quickly, I think really what people need to understand is how valuable the app retirement project can be when coupled with an application upgrade or other portfolio project that you may have. Here's the statistics of the cost to keep legacy applications running. And as you can see, there's a large preponderance of people that are spending 6 figures and above, and a good amount, 22% are spending 7 figures and above on keeping these applications. And that's whether you have unique database requirements, patch levels, you're hiring consultants, or you have that proprietary hardware that's very hard to get off of. So when I say, as over a decade of being an analyst, we see a lot of ROI models, we see a lot of justifications that are built on soft costs, and people have a hard time moving those types of projects to the top of their list. I've rarely seen one as evident to do with hard cost savings as app retirement. This is why we consider it low-hanging fruit, and I think it's justifiable. It's the title of this presentation today. There's just so much money to be saved if you actually pay attention to what can be done by retiring that application, but yet keeping the data accessible. So my final, as I finish up my part of the conversation today, hopefully you can use some of that information that we've shared to, one, get the projects on the radar screen, or at least augment the project, two, to justify it with real hard dollars, because we believe there's a lot of savings there. Know that you are not alone. 50% of companies that we've surveyed have plans to do this. They have seen the numbers that we have shared, and they believe they can get cost savings. That cost impact is not that hard to measure, we believe, which makes this right for anybody trying to figure out what they do with their older systems. The second, when you see savings as large as this, and you know that there's a trajectory for more application upgrades or more changeovers in systems or more consolidation, is that don't just do it once. Look for other applications that can be consolidated, and thus creating the need for retirement processes. More and more, if you have a nice portfolio of applications, you can build a competency of upgrading and retiring. So it comes along with the change management. Just don't forget the second part of that project, which is getting rid of the older stuff, and yet keeping it accessible. So there's a competency to be had here, just like you have a competency in transitioning applications or modernizing applications. It's a great story. There's a lot of data to support it, so we're not just sitting here telling you this. We have strong data here. And I think as Mark takes you through how you go about doing this, you realize that it's entirely achievable. So Mark, thanks very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So your data is really resonates with our experience with a number of our customers, particularly this last bullet about IT competency. Well, we're actually seeing a number of our customers create what they call archiving or retirement factories, which emphasizes the repeatable nature of this process and the idea that it's possible to take the methodology and cookie cutter it such that you can be retiring multiple applications concurrently through a factory process. And we've been doing this now for about 2 years at T-Mobile and at Merck, and we're aware of quite a number of other customers with ourselves and IBM that prefer to remain anonymous but are doing similar kinds of factory models and competency centers. I want to now kind of move into how you go about identifying these candidates, and then how we go about executing projects like this in a little bit more detail so you get a sense of the path forward. So just a minute on what is a good application candidate. This sort of brings together some of the threads that we've already been talking about in the last few minutes. But this kind of gives you a sense of sort of a rough checklist of where to look for the top priorities. So number one, these are typically applications that are inactive, meaning they're no longer processing new transactions, but they're just being used for periodic data access. These are applications that are running on dedicated hardware, meaning if you can stop them, you can retire or reclaim the hardware, the related code, application code, the related database and licenses associated with those, as well as the maintenance cost associated with all of those. And oftentimes these are annual license renewals for maintenance purposes. So you oftentimes can see near-term cost savings just by not renewing the licenses in addition to retiring the apps. In addition, these applications will incur some amount of ongoing labor for management purposes through system administration or DBA or other functions, IT applications. Particularly attractive are ones that are on old hardware platforms that are starting to get harder to maintain and are clearly going to be at end of life before very long, so that keeping them going is going to be increasingly expensive if possible at all. And then lastly, these application candidates are the ones that for which the half-life of the institutional memory is starting to fade. As the applications are no longer being used in production, the people who maintain them kind of move on, and they're no longer fresh in people's minds as to how they actually work. And lastly, the best candidates are the ones for which the data needs to be kept around by regulatory requirements or Sarbanes-Oxley audit type requirements. So, so this is kind of the checklist of things that would be used to prioritize a list of potential candidates for retirement. Go through, we've helped customers define the vetting process and the methodology to kind of flow through the approvals in an organization to pick the top candidates. So as I mentioned, we've been in this business with IBM now for about 4 years. We are a Silicon Valley-based company with economy ourselves. Our founders and myself were at Oracle for about 40 years, so we know enterprise applications from the Oracle perspective, and we specialize in enterprise data management of business applications using IBM Optum. I want to spend a few minutes on IBM Optum because it's really the dominant platform in enterprise data management, and I've got a few slides that will talk about that in a minute. But the latest Gartner report shows them with really dominant market share, about 5x the nearest competitor, and it's because this is a true platform for managing applications at the end of their lives, so retiring them and archiving them. The methodology we like to use, this factory kind of model, involves going through an inventorying process, a vetting process, as I just described. Oftentimes there's an ROI model that goes along with that we are able to help our clients measure the potential savings, and then go through a process of prioritization, execution in the factory, and then the actual retirement and reclaiming of the cost savings associated with these projects. Okay, so a couple of words about IBM Optum itself. This is a platform that was acquired by IBM about 5 years ago from a company called Princeton Softech, 20-year-old technology. Originally came out of the mainframe world and is now a full platform. It has 5 major products. The one we're talking about this morning is called Decommissioning Solution. That's the one toward the lower right. But it's part of a family that also does archiving with Data Growth Solution in the lower right. And then a couple of products that deal with non-production databases for test data management using a subsetting strategy, and data privacy for the purpose of masking sensitive data in non-production systems so that that data is secured properly. So this decommissioning solution is part of an overall platform and engine that deals with almost any kind of application. I want to just cover quickly what the real differentiators are in this platform, and particularly starting off with this enterprise nature, the platform nature of the product. So Optum itself supports virtually any kind of storage device at the bottom layer of the stack, any kind of operating system, modern or legacy, virtually any database, again, distributed, mainframe, mini computer, other sort of legacy databases, so any data source. And then out-of-the-box support for quite a number of packaged applications in the leading ERP. So these orange and green boxes represent templates that come with Optum for the purpose of archiving or retiring these packaged applications. So because of the enterprise nature of this, you can apply common practices using Optum as a way of executing your corporate data retention strategy and for building what we like to call a corporate archive repository. And this is sort of a new asset that corporations are building to manage data through to the end of its life and applying successfully the corporate data retention policy. The second major principle of Optum that makes it very effective is the concept of archiving or retiring applications based on a complete business object. So the idea here is not only to pull out the transaction data, which might be represented in yellow, in these yellow boxes. That transaction data represents typically where the real volume is. But to keep that data meaningful, to make it fully contextual, you need related data as well. So reference data, perhaps in these green boxes, master record data, say customer master or product master and so on, represented by the blue boxes, and even potentially things like attachments or other types of data that's related to the core transactions, and oftentimes maybe even sitting in other systems or applications in a federated model. So the idea behind Optum here is that we archive data as whole business objects such that when you go into the archive for reporting purposes, that data is wholly meaningful with all of its context, all of its related reference data. The third major principle of Optum that we that sort of thing. So it can be relied on as a permanent record. But also you retain the ability to restore data out of those archives back into a production system or into for legal hold. All of those capabilities exist by being able to extract data out of the archive without modifying the archive itself. So that's a very powerful principle. And then the fourth principle that is very important to customers is the idea of being able to access data in the archives via virtually any kind of standard reporting tool, either a third-party report writer, an open source tool, desktop tools, or even native reporting tools that come along with Optum and the IBM product family. So that's why we use Optum successfully. Those principles enable us to achieve the goals of cost savings and regulatory protection of the data. And so that's it in a nutshell. In summary, you get tremendous potential ROI, cost savings by retiring the data and applications and protecting it carefully, but then freeing up valuable hardware, storage, and database and labor resources. Particularly the labor part of this, is becoming scarcer and more valuable to reclaim. And at the same time, it allows you to create a new asset for the corporation, the corporate archive repository, where all data goes to the end of its life. And now you no longer have the guesswork associated with trying to figure out where that data was in the tape library, what is it going to take to restore it and access it again. Rather, it's all available in a related set of files that can be managed across different tiers of storage for cost efficiency, but you always know where it is, and you manage that as proactively as a production application itself. Even though you're not applying transactions to it, you are certainly moving data through it, either retiring new applications or purging data out of old archives that are no longer needed according to your corporate data retention policy. So that's the opportunity. I look forward to the chance to talk to some of you about your own portfolio of applications and how we might be able to help you. And with that, we'll open it up for questions.
Great. Thanks, Mark and Brian, for presenting. To the attendees, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the questions area of GoToWebinar, and we will get them answered. Here's our first question. In what industries are you seeing the greatest activity in application retirement?
I can take that one, this is Brian. From a research standpoint, we've certainly seen it in the financial services industry because of the amount of merger and acquisition activity and absorption activity that occurred over the past couple of years from an economic condition standpoint. That coupled with the compliance factors there. has been quite substantial. I think the second has been in retail. There's been a lot of investment in newer systems and a lot more upgrades going on because of customer relationship management, I think, would be a top one. And then I think the third would be energy. Again, there's been a lot of merger and activity there. There's a lot of complex applications that are getting rolled out. So, you know, those would be my top three. There's a few others out there, but I think that would be my top three just because of the application profile and things that are going on in those industries specifically at the macro level.
And I would add two more that we're seeing a lot of interest in. One, the first is in the telecommunications industry, and it's simply, I think, because there's
I think Mark, you're breaking up a bit.
For accumulation of lots and lots of apps.
Can you repeat that, Mark?
And
I'm
then
sorry.
lastly,
you're breaking up a bit there.
Oh, I'm sorry. The telecommunications industry is the fourth. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah, you sound fine now. Great.
And then lastly, in life sciences, biotech and pharmaceuticals, where regulatory issues, I think, are driving a lot of the need for maintaining data safely with some of the mechanisms I described.
Okay, thank you. Next question, how long does it take to retire a typical application?
I would say that typically we assess applications by complexity. For a moderately complex application, it would typically take 2 to 4 weeks to extract the data and all the metadata associated with it so it's meaningful, and provide some basic query capabilities against it. In some cases, specific kinds of reports are also needed. Sometimes we have to recreate reports from the production system. That can take a fair amount more work, depending on the complexity of those reports, like financial statements and such, that have to be reverse engineered. But in many cases, ability across tables, and the whole project can be done within a month.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mark. Are there advantages to transferring already retired applications to a corporate archive repository, as you described?
Yeah, so I've talked about this a little bit already. You know, already retired applications are typically written off to tape, both the data and the code, and so there's risk associated with trying to restore them. So one strategy that companies are looking at is to take their corporate archive repository that's now being loaded with newly retired apps, and then going back and sort of restoring those old applications from tape back into life for the purpose of re-archiving them for just the data itself into this standard format. And the benefit of that then is that it's all managed together as one big repository with standard reporting tools applied to it. And so it's a way of reducing the risk of having to worry about what it's going to take to restore applications down the road.
Okay, great. Thank you. Here's a question. One of the big fear factors for us in healthcare is capturing the business object, all that reverse engineering. It contributes greatly to time and cost. How do you attack that?
So the process of retiring an application can be
Mark, we're losing you here.
Parse the database into specific business objects. You can take an express approach and archive all the data and all the associated metadata with it, and then go through a separate process after the archive is done to kind of think through the business objects from a reporting standpoint. Now, we have to do this in the life sciences industry because of FDA requirements for what are called validated applications. So there's methodologies that our clients have developed for the process of taking a validated application, retiring it using Optum, and revalidating it using standard processes. And so I think it's equivalent to that healthcare question, I think. And it's certainly possible to do it. The complexity and effort involved in doing it has a lot to do with how sophisticated the reporting needs to be out of it. It can be quick and easy, or it could be fairly complex on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thanks, Mark. How do you ensure that retired applications comply with regulatory requirements such as FDA application validation?
Yeah, so I sort of just answered that. And I would simply add that that process is usually driven by internal methodology around validated applications that's in compliance with FDA defined processes. So every company has their own process of doing that. Usually a QA function within the company owns it, and then the compliance side of the house, reviews it. So those processes can be adapted to retiring applications successfully using Optum, and we've started to build out some best practices from our clients in doing that.
Okay, great.
And Mark, this is Brian. If I'm not mistaken, doesn't Optum provide a complete audit trail that can be exported out, so you can see exactly what the steps were and how everything, including the business logic, was captured? And then
yeah, that's correct. So and that's part of that validation process.
Yeah.
So it's largely a documentation methodology more than anything else.
Okay, great. Our last question: how much effort does it take to manage a corporate archive repository?
So our clients who have institutionalized this, out of in a data operations function, view the repository as a production application. It doesn't require this application because you're not going to have the same concerns about maintaining SLAs and performance for reporting purposes. That's typically not the big driver. So the processes that are used are, regular backups, regular monitoring of the data retention policy to make sure that data is purged according to a schedule. A lot of that can be automated, but sometimes it's, manually reviewed from time to time. Periodic audits to make sure, say, for FDA requirements, to make sure that the data hasn't been corrupted. So, all on balance, that whole function is probably less than a full FTE. And a lot of it can be automated through scheduling tools.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, guys. We have no more questions. Thank you to the attendees for joining today's webinar. We've recorded the webinar, and we're going to put it up on S2H's website. That should be up in maybe a day or so. And you can see Mark and Brian's contact information on the screen there. If you have any questions after this webinar, feel free to reach out to either of them. Thanks again, guys, for presenting, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.